Welcome to And All Shall Be Well. I am your host, Megan Rohr, and this is a special solo episode where I'm going to tell you some stories about ways that mistakes have led to some of the most meaningful transformations in my life. And it's just basically a pep talk for anyone who is feeling like their mistakes mean they're never going to get ahead in the world. Maybe you're in the midst of something that is hard and feels like you don't know how to move forward and you can't see anything better coming out of what's up in the future. This episode is not trying to say that old Christian cliche that something good grows out of every bad thing. No, that's not true. There's a lot of terrible things that have happened in my life, and absolutely nothing good has come from it. But a time or two, some mistakes led me in spaces I did not expect to go. And I want to share these stories in hopes that you will be curious about how you can move forward in new and beautiful and creative ways when things don't go quite the way you thought they would. The first stop in this journey is a time when I was in school learning how to be a pastor, learning about faith. And there's this class called Systematic Theology. Systematic Theology is the idea that in one book or a volume of books, you can take all the ideas of what is needed to be known about how the world works in a faith perspective and figure it all out. Now, I'm the kind of person that sort of believes that faithful, mystical, spiritual things are much bigger than could be bound in a book. And so I entered the class a little bit skeptical. I'm also someone who thinks that the beauty and intricacy of what we learn about the world unfolds continuously as we encounter more and more diversity. The more we travel and learn about new spaces, the more we gain more information about how the world is bigger and maybe better than we expected. And I'm always learning more from the new interactions and the new moments and the new ways of being in the world. So that's my personal perspective. But there are other people who really believe that there is an order and a rhythm to things, and this order and rhythm can be studied and known. So in this class that was about helping me understand the order and rhythm of a particular professor, he believed that in order to be a good faith leader, you had to first tell people they were sinful and bad, and that a divine being would come and make things better for them. At the time, I was working for the homeless with a lot of people who had been pushed out of their homes because of their identities, or people who had experienced institutional racism so deep that the poverty was multi generational, people who had been in and out of the judicial system and maybe had been incarcerated. Some of these things you might think were deserved based on their behaviors, and some of these things were definitely, clearly not deserved, and a result of being a foster child or a result of being born with a disability in a time when they put everyone into an institution. And so the people that I was encountering on a daily basis on Polk Street in San Francisco, the homeless and marginally housed and hungry folk that I had the pleasure of being able to eat with on the regular basis, lived lives where they had been told for so long that they were bad and that they were unredeemable, that to start any faithful conversation with them that started with "you're bad and unredeemable" ends the conversation full stop, because people had used that language in very abusive ways with them. And so it was going to be very hard for me to pass this class where you had to say that sentence at the beginning of your paper and turn it in. And the purpose of this class was to like figure out what your faith was going to be into the future. And it felt like a class where you had to agree with the professor if you wanted to pass. Well, I had a choice then. I could do the work of what the class was supposed to be and figure out how I wanted to have conversations and how I wanted to have faith in the world. I could use this time to study ways that I could talk to other human beings, or I could simply write down what the professor liked, parrot it back, and write it. Would have been much easier to submit that paper and get an A. Instead, I made a mistake. I researched probably more deeply than I would have if I was just given the assignment to state what I personally believed, because I knew that I probably would get a bad grade for not agreeing with that opening sentence of "you're all terrible" before saying, "but don't worry, because God's really, 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 really compassionate and wants to care for you." Wanting to skip that first sentence of "you're so terrible" because people had heard it so much meant that I did a lot of extra work to try to show that I wasn't being flippant, I wasn't being mean, I wasn't uh, choosing not to do the homework assignment. I wrote and wrote and wrote and researched and learned about how people with some of the embodiments that I have lived in the world, and started talking to the homeless people that I was with to really see like what language works for you to like have this conversation and talk about the ways that faith can be a part of your life. And I wrote this paper that I was super proud of, turned it in, failed so on purpose. Failed so on purpose. Was proud to have failed because this paper I felt was worth my time and my effort for that semester. But because it was a kind of curriculum where you had to take systematic theology in order to get your degree at the end, I then had to take this class over with a different professor. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take my redo systematic theology class with Shonsheng Song, CS Song, as he is known, who was at the time the president of the World Council of Churches and is a follower of Jesus, but from a Chinese perspective, and wrote a series of books about what the Jesus story means in an Asian context, and how the stories can be told using the life and culture and words and language of the community that he personally was a part of. He read my paper that I had put all this work into and said, "You have already like completed the final project that is the normal final project of this class. So instead, what I want you to do with this time that you're in this class is to keep working. There are people like you with all the intersections that you embody who need people to do this writing." He was one of the very first people who was writing about theology in an Asian context, and he thought that LGBTQ people could use some more people who were doing that writing. And so he said, "I want to support you. Keep writing. I will read it. I will give you feedback. I will help you." And so by the end of this class, I had a whole collection of writings, which ended up being my first published book called Queerly Lutheran. And the idea was simply to say that people of diverse embodiments have a right to be a part of faith stories, that we don't have to simply change and crumple our bodies like an empty soda can in order to be loved by God. But that if the whole point of the message is that diversity is beautiful and fabulous, that can be the start of the sentence too. What if your diversity is beautiful and fabulous enough right now that spirituality and the way we understand the world can handle it without having to crumple, deflate, and change you? So because I had put so much work into the world, I put the book out, and it was published through Wilgefortis Press. Sort of goes out into the ether. Not very many people pay attention to it, and then every once in a while, someone who's LGBTQ would say, "Hey, I read your book. It was great." And I'm like, "What?" I kind of had forgotten that I had written it. Then, like, so I wrote this in 2009. Around 2015, I get an email from the folk in Wittenberg, Germany, where they're celebrating the the anniversary, the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther's Reformation, when he when he kind of changes the Christian church by telling people that liberation is possible and that God isn't just all stuck in the grumpy yuck parts of what we imagine divine presence could be. But Luther believed that embracing the full fabulousness of the world is a part of what God was up to. And so they had selected this book as one of 500 people, alive and dead, who had written works that were moving the world forward and kind of in Martin Luther's legacy. And I just, in that moment, never could have expected that this would have happened. And, excuse me, and found myself in a space where this mistake, failing a class, meant that I was being respected by a whole community of people as a proper theologian who had written works that was ahead of my time. My hope is that you will embrace some of these mistakes, go forward with failing something so good that it moves the world in a new direction, or that at least makes you feel whole and like you have a space that is yours in the world. Later in my life, I got invited to Trondheim, Norway, to speak about the ways that Christian churches speak about trans individuals and have devalued our bodies and our sacredness. And after speaking there, it was reported in the newspapers that I was a bishop, that I was a transgender bishop. And I had not occurred to me that this was a thing that would ever be possible within my lifetime. And I was very ashamed. I thought everyone would think that I had somehow misled the newspaper. And then I realized most people don't speak Norwegian, and they were not probably going to notice and have all of these feelings that I was carrying with me. And then sort of my brain shifted a little bit, and I thought, wow, a lot of the world now thinks that there is a transgender bishop. Why don't I believe that that's a possible thing? And it gave me the courage and the bravery I needed to see if that could be a thing. It ended up being a thing for a little while, and it changed the history of the church. It doesn't always go the way we want it to when we move forward in life, but every once in a while, mistakes and typos change our path forward. And so if you encounter situations like I did with that typo, where shame is the easiest first feeling to have, I want to encourage you today and every day going forward, don't hold on to the shame, but pay attention to where there might be possibilities for your future or for the future of people around you. Keep your eyes open for diversity. Keep your eyes open for mistakes that you're supposed to step into, because what other people view as a mistake might be you living fully into your authentic self, you living fully into the ethics and the morality and the faithfulness that you alone are called to. Maybe it's just a mistake, but maybe it's something more. If you have made some mistakes that you can't stop thinking about, and maybe at 3 a.m. they pop back into your head, and you wonder if you could have done something different or better, I want you to have the opportunity today to set them down. Know that even if you could have done something better, all's going to be well. Even if you make something of these mistakes and you make them into better life opportunities in the future, all shall be well. Right, wrong, indifferent, doing the right thing with bad intent, doing the wrong thing with good intent, all shall be well. You're not alone. You're not a mistake. And the mistakes that you make in the world aren't always the worst that can happen. Embrace yourself, and know that I love you with all your mistakes, with all your fabulousness. And I'm so grateful that you took a second to listen to my stories. Next week, we'll be back with a new guest talking about ways that their wellness journey has taken them in their life. And I hope you will tune in again. In the meantime, like, subscribe, or whatever it is that you do. And I hope that you will consider joining and supporting us on Patreon or on any of the other social media spaces where I'll just frankly want to be rooting for you each and every day. Take care.